Hi everyone, and welcome to The Altered State, where we turn churchy things right side up in an upside down world. Friends, as we enter into this third Sunday after Easter, we should all be struck by the fact that the Sunday readings we've had, now on Easter Sunday, on Low Sunday, and today, all feature gospel accounts that took place on Easter Sunday. Despite the fact that the octave of Easter ended last week, the Church is still presenting us with various accounts of just what happened on Easter Sunday. It's almost like watching the same episode of a TV show, but all from different perspectives. It's all in real time, and different people are all having different experiences surrounding the same central event. The account of Jesus meeting two of his disciples on the road to Emmaus is unique because it doesn't focus on his 12 apostles, nor on any of those who were there with him when he died on Calvary. These were two of his regular followers. The fathers of the church speculate as to their identities, but of course we don't really know. No matter who the pair were, what we do know is what they were talking about on the 7-mile journey from Jerusalem, the rumors that Jesus' body was missing from the tomb and that he was actually alive. Now, for us believers, I think the story is somewhat dulled in its impact because we already know what happened. But put yourself in the shoes of the two disciples. Consider the disappointment in their hearts. Just a week prior, they had most certainly ushered Jesus into Jerusalem, waving palm branches, yelling and screaming. Their King, their Redeemer, had come. Here he was to cast off the imperial yoke of the Romans and to restore the kingdom of Israel and the throne of David. But how much can change in a week? So they're given an opportunity to vent their frustrations and disappointment to one who appears to be a stranger, though we know it to be Jesus himself. They even comment that this guy must be the only person in all of Judea who doesn't know what happened, for the news had begun to spread far and wide. I like what St. Bede the Venerable, says. When Luke comments that Jesus was unknown to the two disciples, Bede seizes upon this and suggests that indeed Jesus was a stranger to them. He says, now that he had obtained the glory of the resurrection, he was far removed, and to those whose faith was as yet ignorant of the resurrection, he remained a foreigner. I think this is a good reminder to all of us that faith can never simply be a matter of speculation or paying lip service to something. For these two disciples, and for all of us, our faith demands an encounter with the risen Christ that is more than an intellectual or speculative exercise. It must consist of a real encounter with the veil of speculation over our hearts being lifted to permit us to enter completely into a relationship with Christ Jesus. The account of the disciples along the road to Emmaus is a chronicle of the progression of faith in the Christian life. They walk along the road having encountered an account of the truth. They're frightened and disheartened, moving through the deserts surrounding Jerusalem. They know where they're going, but they become preoccupied with this news they've learned that all their thought focuses on it. They begin speaking to one another, talking in rather speculative terms about what they've heard, but what they've not yet come to experience for themselves. Then Christ Jesus, truth himself, enters into the picture. At first they challenge him, not in a malicious or argumentative way, but rather as a means of pushing back at the truth and teasing out for themselves what they're already pondering. We all do this when we hear something that we need time to wrap our minds around rather than just blindly accepting it. Consider back when you were in school. And in math class, your teacher tells you that 2 + 1 = 3. And most of us would accept that as a fact. But that fact becomes far more real when she places 2 apples on the desk, counts them out, and then places another one next to them, counts them out again, and the 2 have magically become 3. So the disciples push back against the truth in order to test it, to challenge it a bit, and to prove it. At this point, Christ takes the upper hand and begins to tease out for them the hidden realities contained in the news they've received, teaching them. This is the period of catechesis, in which one journeying toward Christ begins to learn and to understand more deeply the realities of the faith. It's also part of our mission to evangelize, to take what others have heard, to offer correction and guidance, information and context, to help others see the truth that is the faith. St. Augustine, in one of his sermons, says that these disciples were walking with their eyes shut. Indeed, they were, just as many of us do in the period of instruction when we are learning about the faith. And then, as the sun began to set and darkness crept across the land, their eyes were slowly opened. The light that is faith in Jesus Christ began to penetrate the darkness of their hearts, a light so intense that even the sun would begin to appear dark in its presence. And notice how the more intense their catechesis is, and the longer they persevere on the journey, how their hearts burn within them, and they desire more and more. And they get to their destination. They beg Jesus to remain with them, to continue to teach them. They can't get enough. And see how Jesus acts as if he's going on farther, because there's no end to the journey of faith. Faith is a supernatural virtue. It can't be finite. Anyone who says, "Oh, I believe and I've learned it all," frankly, they're either a liar or a fool. We can never believe too much or know too much about God and his wonders. So Jesus is prepared to lead them further. And I'm not sure any of us could imagine just what else he would have done for them if they'd continued with him. But they stop at a point and beg him to remain. Their journey of catechesis is ending, and it comes to its culmination where? In the breaking of the bread, the Mass, the Eucharist. These disciples, no doubt, would have heard from the 12 apostles about the somewhat unconventional Passover meal celebrated on Holy Thursday, in which Jesus first broke the bread and offered the wine, calling them his very body and blood. The source and summit of the Christian life, the Eucharist, then, becomes the moment in which all our learning, our catechesis, our journeying is made manifest. And we view all things through the lens of the Eucharist because of what it is: Jesus Christ himself, Christ crucified, Christ risen, body and blood, soul and divinity. It all becomes clear to us in the Mass, the profound act of worship in which the humble gifts of bread and wine truly become that very body and blood by which we have been redeemed. Now, there's the obvious issue of us not being able to be present together at Mass. It's a reality that strikes me every time I approach the altar in silence and solitude. And while we see churches begin to open in other parts of the country, the logical response is to say, why not us? And I don't have a good answer to that question because I don't get to make those decisions. A priest friend of mine suggested that this is a tremendous opportunity that we Catholics have been given, citing the old adage, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And while I don't deny the truth of that adage, I reminded him that there's something missing from it in this context. In order for our hearts to grow fonder, we must first actually be in love with Jesus Christ, with his church, with the Eucharist and the Mass. I know many of you are, and I pray daily that the Lord increases in your hearts that very same burning that was in the hearts of the 2 disciples as they walked the long road with Jesus. All our hearts should be burning more and more with love of him, in joyful anticipation that our exile might soon be over. So what if that's not the case? What if we've just fallen into a very lackadaisical mode? We've shifted into neutral and said to ourselves that, oh, we'll just pick up where we left off when all of this is over. Friends, if that's you, snap out of it right now. Because there again, look at those two disciples. Look at the fervor with which they begged Jesus to remain with them, to continue to fill them with his knowledge and grace and truth. How empty their experience would have been if they had just let him depart and taken their meager meal on their own. If we cannot have Jesus in his body and blood, soul and divinity in the Eucharist, we can at least continue to keep the flame of love we ought to have for him burning in our hearts. That's our mission right now. That's our responsibility, not to allow the gift of faith that we've journeyed so hard to attain to slip through our fingers, because it is possible. Our mediocrity, our spiritual laziness, our apathy towards having a faith that truly forms and informs our lives, they all lead us backwards down the path, away from Emmaus and back to the beginning in which Jesus truly is a stranger to us. Our hearts will only grow fonder so long as we continue to grow in faith in these days of quarantine and social distance. Without that love, we wind up just going through the motions, paying lip service, putting ourselves right back into the clutches of what St. Peter calls today our futile conduct. Today is yet another opportunity by which we can move beyond that, to journey once again with Christ Jesus, to permit his truth to set our hearts aflame with love of him, and to pursue our growth in faith with unrelenting determination and an insatiable desire for him. Today is the Lord's Day. Take part of today to learn something new about the faith, to fall more deeply in love with Christ Jesus, and to understand better how he is calling you to live a life of holiness and faith. You're all in my prayers. Until next time, don't just be good, be better.